My boss grinned. "Congratulations, you're fired." I calmly handed over my laptop and said, "Best of luck with the investor demo tomorrow." As security walked me out, I smiled. My secret code would activate in 10 minutes. What happened next shocked everyone. I never thought I'd be thankful for getting fired, but life has this funny way of serving justice when you least expect it. My name's Alex Thompson, and until yesterday I was a senior developer at Tech Vision Corp, one of those startups in San Francisco that promises to disrupt something or other. We were actually doing pretty well, on the verge of securing Series B funding that would have put us on the map. I'd been with the company for 3 years, practically since the beginning, coding until my eyes burned most nights. The tension between me and my boss, Richard Bennett, had been brewing for months. Richard was the kind of executive who wore designer suits to an office where everyone else coded in hoodies. He had this habit of hovering behind developers, asking, "How's it coming along?" Every 15 minutes like that would somehow make complex algorithms materialize faster. The real issue, though? Richard had a pattern of presenting other people's work as his own. Last quarter, he took my database architecture improvements to the board and walked away with a fat bonus. My name, buried in the technical appendix no one read. Despite everything, I genuinely cared about Tech Vision. I believed in what we were building, software that could revolutionize how small businesses handle inventory management. The core algorithm was my baby, something I'd been refining for months. Our big investor demo was scheduled for tomorrow with Jonathan Hayes, a venture capitalist known for his deep pockets and deeper technical knowledge. Hayes wasn't someone you could dazzle with buzzwords and empty promises. He'd want to see the real deal, and Richard knew it. I was putting finishing touches on the demo when Richard's assistant pinged me. "Bennett wants to see you in his office now." The glass-walled corner office loomed at the end of the hall like a fishbowl, where everyone could watch whatever was about to happen. I knew something was off the moment I walked in. Richard had that look, the one where he tries to hide his satisfaction behind a mask of corporate solemnity. "Alex, take a seat," he said, not looking up from his monitor. I remained standing. "I'll get right to it." Richard finally looked up with that practiced executive stare. "The board and I have been evaluating team performance, and we've made some tough decisions." Then came that smile. Not sympathetic, not professional, but gleeful, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Congratulations, you're fired." The way he said congratulations made my stomach turn. 3 years of late nights, missed weekends, and brilliant solutions reduced to this moment of petty triumph for a man who couldn't code his way out of a text editor. But instead of the explosion Richard clearly wanted, I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out my company laptop, and placed it gently on his ridiculously expensive desk. "Best of luck with the investor demo tomorrow," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Richard's smile faltered for just a second, confusion replacing his smugness. He'd expected tears, maybe pleading. What he got was something he couldn't quite read, and I saw that uncertainty flicker across his face as he buzzed for security. Mike Johnson from security arrived within minutes, his face a mix of professional detachment and genuine awkwardness. We'd shared beers at company events, and now he was escorting me out like I'd stolen office supplies. "Sorry about this, Alex," he muttered as we walked past rows of desks where my colleagues pretended to be deeply focused on their screens. Nobody makes eye contact during the walk of shame. It's like an unwritten rule of startup culture. As we passed through the open workspace, I caught Emma Carter's eye. She was my closest ally at Tech Vision, a brilliant UX designer who'd been there since day one. Her expression shifted from shock to anger as she watched Mike guide me toward the exit. I gave her the slightest shake of my head. "Don't make a scene, not now." She understood immediately, but mouthed, "Call me," when Mike wasn't looking. The elevator ride down 20 floors gave me time to think about what I'd done last night. I wasn't proud of it, exactly, but I wasn't ashamed either. 3 days ago, I'd had this feeling, call it developer's intuition, that something wasn't right. Richard had been asking unusually specific questions about the demo architecture, how the authentication protocols worked, where the documentation was stored. Then, he'd accidentally scheduled me for a conflict during the Hayes presentation prep. The signs were all there. So, I'd stayed late, long after everyone else had gone home, and added what programmers sometimes call an Easter egg into the system. Not a virus, not malware, nothing destructive. Just a simple authentication protocol tied to the demo's initialization sequence. A small piece of code that would activate exactly 10 minutes after the demo began, revealing the true development history of every component. In programmer terms, I'd made the code transparent rather than malicious. Every contribution would be properly attributed, with timestamps and commit messages clearly visible. As Mike swiped his badge to let me out through the lobby's glass doors, I couldn't help but smile. "Something funny about getting fired?" he asked, not unkindly. "Sometimes things work out exactly as they should, Mike," I replied, stepping into the late afternoon sunshine. I checked my watch, 5:17 p.m. By this time tomorrow, Richard would be in the middle of his presentation to Jonathan Hayes, about 20 minutes in, right when he'd be showing off the innovative architecture he'd supposedly masterminded. On Market Street toward the BART station, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "WTF happened. Richard's telling everyone you were let go for performance issues. Absolute BS. Team's in shock." I didn't reply immediately. Emma deserved the full story, but not over text, and not while I was still processing everything. The weight of 3 years ending so abruptly should have felt heavier, but instead, I felt lighter with each step away from that glass tower. My apartment felt different that night, like I was seeing it for the first time in ages. The stack of unwashed coffee mugs by the sink, the dead plant I'd been meaning to revive, the fitness tracker gathering dust on my nightstand, all evidence of a life sacrificed to Tech Vision's growth. I ordered takeout from that Thai place around the corner and actually sat at my table to eat it instead of hunching over my keyboard like usual. When Emma called around 8 p.m., I was halfway through my pad thai and second beer. "Alex, this is complete insanity," she started, not bothering with hello. "Richard called an emergency meeting after you left, claimed you'd been underperforming for months and that he'd been carrying your workload." David looked like he wanted to say something, but just sat there nodding along. Emma's voice had that fierce loyalty that made her both an amazing friend and a formidable colleague. "Did anyone buy it?" I asked, trying to sound more casual than I felt. The clock on my microwave read 8:17 p.m. Exactly 18 hours until Richard's house of cards would collapse. The new developers seemed confused, but didn't question it. Melissa from legal looked uncomfortable. But get this, Richard spent 2 hours after the meeting with the tech team asking questions about the demo architecture. David's team is scrambling because apparently Richard told Hayes he personally refined the algorithm that makes the whole system work. Emma paused. "Alex, that's your algorithm, isn't it? The one you stayed up for 3 days straight coding last month?" I took another swig of beer. "Yup, and the documentation system, and the efficiency protocols." I hadn't meant to sound bitter, but there it was. "So what are you going to do? File a complaint? You have all the evidence in your personal GitHub repositories, right?" Emma had always been a fighter, ready to take on corporate injustice wherever she found it. I checked the time again, 8:24 p.m. "Let's just say I've already done something. Richard's going to have an interesting meeting tomorrow." I didn't elaborate further, and Emma knew me well enough not to push. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the city lights outside my window. Had I gone too far? The code wouldn't damage anything, I'd made sure of that. It would simply reveal the truth in a way Richard couldn't talk his way out of. Still, that momentary doubt crept in. 3 years of my life were wrapped up in Tech Vision. Would my little act of justice cost other people their jobs if the Hayes deal fell through? Emma called me at exactly 9:47 a.m. the next morning, her voice a harsh whisper. "You will not believe what's happening right now. I'm hiding in the supply closet to call you." The background noise suggested chaos, raised voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable sound of corporate panic. "The Hayes meeting started about 20 minutes ago," Emma continued. "Richard was in rare form, Navy designer suit, that red power tie he thinks makes him look authoritative. He had the entire executive team lined up behind him like backup dancers. Hayes brought 2 technical advisors with him, and they'd been taking notes on everything. According to Emma, the presentation had started smoothly enough. Richard had welcomed Hayes with his practiced charm, talking big numbers and market potential. David Miller, our CTO, handled the technical overview, while Richard nodded knowingly as if he understood every line of code being discussed. Then Richard took over for the live demo portion, Emma said, her voice rising with excitement. He was showing off the user interface, clicking through all the features you designed, talking about how he directed the architectural vision for the platform. Hayes seemed impressed, asking questions about the efficiency algorithms. That's when things got interesting. Right as Richard was demonstrating the inventory prediction feature, the crown jewel of our system, the interface flickered. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift that most people wouldn't notice. But then a small window appeared in the corner of the screen. It looked like some kind of diagnostic tool at first, Emma explained. David thought it was a debugging window that someone forgot to disable. But then it started displaying commit messages, timestamps, and contributor names. Your name was everywhere, Alex, on every major feature Richard was claiming credit for. The window expanded gradually, showing detailed development history, comments between team members, even those late-night messages where Richard had demanded changes without understanding the technical implications. More damning was the documentation that popped up, meeting notes where you had explained concepts to Richard that he was now presenting as his own innovations. Hayes isn't stupid, Emma continued. He started asking Richard specific technical questions about implementation decisions shown in the history. Richard kept looking at David for help, but David was just as confused about where this information was coming from. The room had grown increasingly tense as Richard fumbled through responses, his confident facade crumbling with each question. When Hayes asked about the specific machine learning approach used in the demand forecasting algorithm, Richard had made the fatal mistake of trying to bluff his way through. It was painful to watch, Emma said. Hayes' technical advisor actually corrected Richard, pointing at your name in the commit history and asking why the architect of the system couldn't explain his own design decisions. By this point, Jonathan Hayes had stopped taking notes and was simply observing Richard with the kind of look investors reserve for people wasting their time. The presentation had effectively derailed, with Richard stammering about team efforts and how he oversaw the vision, while the evidence of my work remained prominently displayed for everyone to see. David finally stepped in, Emma concluded, and suggested they take a short break. Richard practically ran out of the conference room. They'd been in an emergency huddle for the last 10 minutes. I heard your name mentioned about 20 times already. Just as Emma was finishing her account, she whispered, "Oh, shoot, gotta go. Hayes is asking to speak with the actual development team. I'll call you back." The line went dead. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a coffee shop a few blocks from my apartment when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, probably another recruiter, but something made me answer. "Is this Alex Thompson?" The voice was authoritative but not unfriendly. "Yes, this is Alex." "Alex, this is Jonathan Hayes. I believe we have some things to discuss." My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Jonathan Hayes, the Jonathan Hayes, was calling me personally? He explained that after the unusual demonstration this morning, he'd requested to speak with the actual development team. When he learned I'd been fired just yesterday, he connected the dots pretty quickly. "That was quite an elegant piece of authentication code you embedded," he remarked, an unmistakable note of appreciation in his voice. "Most people would have gone scorched earth. You just built a transparency system." I admitted to creating the code but explained it wasn't malware or sabotage, just an attribution mechanism that would reveal the true development history. "I didn't crash the system or delete anything," I said. "I just made sure the truth was visible." Hayes chuckled. "Well, it certainly made for an interesting morning. After your colleagues explained what really happened, I had a frank conversation with your board. They seemed surprised by certain aspects of Mr. Bennett's management style." Within an hour, Emma called me in a state of controlled hysteria. "Richard is gone," she practically shouted into the phone. like escorted out by security, gone. The board called an emergency meeting after Hayes left. Nobody's saying it officially yet, but Carroll from HR was preparing his separation papers. The story unfolded over the next few days in fragments of calls and texts. Richard had apparently been taking credit for various team members' work for months, not just mine. The board had suspected something wasn't right, but hadn't realized the extent until Hayes confronted them with what he'd seen. Richard's technical limitations had been exposed in the most public, undeniable way possible. What I hadn't expected was the email that arrived 3 days later from David Miller. "The team misses you. The board wants to talk. Would you consider coming back?" I sat with that email for a full day before responding. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of saying no, but another part remembered the late nights with my team, the problems we'd solved together, the potential of what we were building. The most unexpected turn came the following week, when I found myself sitting across from Jonathan Hayes in a restaurant far nicer than I could afford. "I'm not just investing in tech vision," he explained. "I'm investing in the people who actually build the technology. People like you." Hayes's offer was straightforward. He would complete the Series B funding round as planned, but with conditions, including my return as Chief Technology Officer and significant equity compensation for key technical contributors. "Companies aren't just balance sheets and business plans," Hayes told me as our meeting concluded. "They're the people who do the real work." Richard never understood that. 6 months later, TechVision's platform launched to industry acclaim. My name appears prominently in the About section, along with every major contributor to the system. Emma heads our expanded UX team. David focuses on innovation rather than management politics. Sometimes I think about Richard and wonder what he's doing now. I heard he's consulting for non-technical executives, teaching them about innovation leadership or something equally vague. I don't wish him ill. His own actions caught up with him in the end. As for my famous secret code, we actually kept a version of it in the system. Not the part that displays during demos, obviously, but the attribution tracking. Every feature, bug fix, and improvement is permanently linked to its creators. It's become something of a company philosophy. Credit where credit is due. The funny thing about justice, sometimes it just needs a little help from a few well-placed lines of code.